Hello and welcome everyone to this semester's final presentation of the Transseminar. Together with the class of Spring 22, we have been working on how to tackle climate change in the AI era. We're very, very happy to welcome people here in the audience and also virtually. To the virtual people, you will see on the left that you have a Slido option. We will not be able to take your questions, but feel free to mingle and exchange among yourselves. To the ones here, you will be able to raise your hand and ask questions after the product pitches. With that, let's directly jump into it. I'm Carla.
My name is Dennis.
And I'm Anna-Sophie. And Carla, Dennis, and I, together with the class of Spring 2022, we are delighted to welcome you today to our final presentation. This presentation is a result of 7 weeks intensive research on trends, on scenarios, and on business models in the field of tackling climate change in the AI era. And for everyone who's not yet familiar with the CDTM, CDTM stands for Center for Digital Technologies and Management. And our vision is to connect, to educate, and to empower the innovators of tomorrow.
And how does it look in practice? So every semester, 25 students from different backgrounds, from TUM and LMU, come together to our add-on educational program where we educate the innovation, how to do innovation. We have many project partners from different backgrounds, different scales, and students learn not only theoretical knowledge, but also practical one, working on real problems and producing technologies and solutions for them. What is results of it? So we have nowadays around 1,000 of alumni which create startups working in industry as well in academia.
The CDTM is a place where students can come together with representatives from government and also the industry. And this is a place where they can meet and where they can move innovation forward. And this year's project partner was the Bavarian AI Council and the Bavarian State Ministry for Digital Affairs. A big applause and thank you to you, project partner. It has been really a big journey and a very a great success to do this project with you. A great pleasure for all of us. So thank you for being here and thank you for your support. And we really hope that the findings from today's presentation and the results of this report will really support your endeavors in tackling climate change in the AI era.
Let's have a look in agenda of today.
But before, let's have a look at what this past 7 weeks have been all about. These past 7 weeks have been all about looking into the past and also our upcoming future. The 26 students of the class of Spring 22 have been working full-time during their semester breaks on this project. And the Transseminar is all about approaching uncertainty in a structured way. And how we do this is through going through different phases. So we started with the intro phase. Here, the students got to know each other, they got to learn about the basics of management and technology, the basics of how to properly work in teams. And this knowledge helped them then to work properly in their different group works through the different phases that came later. In the first, the trends phase, it was all about researching the current status of the topic and understanding better what are the driving forces that will drive the next 5 years of this industry. Then we use this knowledge to extrapolate scenarios in the second phase, creating extreme but plausible scenarios of the future of how 2042 might look like. Stay tuned because we have some time travelers with us today that will paint a picture of what this world looks like. We use then this knowledge to create in the ideation phase different business models that are future-proof based on the understanding that we gained from the previous phases. This past week has been all about how to communicate all of these findings. Today, we're doing it through this presentation, but this is only a summarized format of everything that the class has done so far. You will find more details in the written trend report that the students have been very, very engagedly and motivatedly working on this past 3 to 4 days. With that, we move over to the agenda.
Yes, exactly. For today, in our climate change, taking climate change in the AI era, we will go first through trends and drivers which come with them. Then we will move to year 2042 and listen very creative scenarios. After that, there will be 5 pitches with new business ideas on how to tackle climate change in AI era. And after that, around 6:20, you will have an opportunity to meet a class and have a talk with them in informal atmosphere personally.
With that, we welcome the first group of students to introduce us to the trends phase.
So, after having heard about CDTM and the Trend Seminar, we would like to introduce you to the content that we've been working on over the past 7 weeks. So, when we first heard about our topic, climate change in the AI era, there were a lot of questions in our minds. What are the main challenges? How will climate change and how it will affect us as humanity? And also, very importantly, what are trends that define this, or that will have an impact on this topic? So, to get an overview or a better understanding of this topic, we worked with multiple research methods to help us understand the driving trends that are in this topic. So, during the first 2.5 weeks, we conducted expert interviews with we had expert lecturers where we listened to and we had the chance to ask questions, which was really interesting because they came from different fields and were very good industry speakers. The second part, the biggest part of work, was online research and data analysis, where we skimmed through reports, analyzed data sets, and so on. We also had some sessions in the World Cafe format where we exchanged with the whole class on our topics to have a broad overview and have also different perspectives from the fellow students of our class, which are coming from very diverse backgrounds. Last but not least, we also had expert interviews and user interviews to get also some further input, external input on that. With the help of this research method, we were able to identify 27 trends in the fields of society and environment, political and legal, technology, economy, and business models. Due to the short amount of time, we're only going to introduce 2 trends per topic. But stay tuned to get to know when our report gets published, which will be very soon. And with that, I'll hand over for the first trends of society.
So the first trend I'm introducing for team society and environment is called towards responsible consumption. We see a rise in mass consumption all over the world due to the fast-growing population. But at the same time, we also see more responsible consumption happening. That means that people care about where their daily goods of life are coming from and whether they're produced sustainably and environmentally friendly. Both of those, mass consumption and responsible consumption, have a huge impact on climate change because households actually account for 2/3 of all emissions, whether direct or indirect, through their behavior. And that is also closely linked to climate activism, which is driving a change in supply chains, for example, through resource efficiency. But there are certainly coming challenges with it. For example, one being that societies and individuals have to actually be able to afford to go green. For the second trend, we're going into the environmental sector to talk about aggravating resource scarcity. We all know that water, for example, is becoming scarcer by day, and climate change is only aggravating this issue. But we also need to think about raw materials and metals that we're starting to use up. And one key driver for that is actually technology, and that there's an increased rise and adoption of technologies all over the world, which are actually depending on those materials for their production and supply chain. And in order to avoid a global crisis caused by resources, we need to change the way we think supply chains and the way we interact with our environment.
And now taking a look at the legal perspective. We saw an increased intertwinedness between digital and green technologies. In fact, European policymakers strive towards what they call a twin transition. Now, what does this mean? European guidelines will trickle down on a national level and impact the digital and green strategies. What we also see is that there is an increased collaboration between firms and policymakers. Now, what are the drivers? The key driver behind this is the European growth model. Which is aiming to achieve the European Green Deal on the one side, but also is aiming towards a digital economy and thereby create a long-term and politically and environmentally resilient Europe. And second, we identified that we're moving from national recommendations towards the implementation of cross-border regulatory frameworks. And with this increase of aligned regulations, we actually have the chance to combine the resources and knowledge that we have about sustainability and implement that on a broader level. But we can also put sustainability on the top of our legal agendas. And the drivers behind that are implementing AI into our policies that are then targeted towards reaching sustainability goals, such as the UN SDGs. And one great example for that is the European AI Act, which was implemented in April last year. But another driver for that is that businesses actually are in favor of these harmonizations, as it is increasing their global competitiveness.
All right, now we're going to take a look at two trends in technology where AI can really have a large impact on our climate. The first one is that AI can play a crucial role in accelerating material discovery, meaning that we find new and more sustainable materials. Why is that important? Well, currently the material discovery and especially the material production industry is accountable for over 20% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. So using more sustainable ones, so for example, graphene instead of steel or solar fuel instead of kerosene would really have a large impact on our climate. However, the problem with finding new materials with normal or with old methods is that it's super complex among thousands and millions of different chemical combinations to find those materials. So here AI, also fueled by advances in quantum computing, comes into play, allowing us to really meet the large and complex material structure models in finding new materials. Moving on to the second trend, this one is optimizing water, energy and waste systems. What does this mean? Well, this means that currently we have mainly centralized resource systems, but are more and more moving towards decentralized ones. This offers large potential in efficiency and also thus greenhouse gas emissions, but also comes with a lot of complexity, because the complexity just gets way larger in these models. And there, exactly AI-enabled management comes into play. So kind of with an AI, we can detect water leakages way earlier. We can make smart grids more reliable, which will be a huge breakthrough in our electricity networks. We can automate the waste separation. So kind of we're really heading towards major breakthroughs in these systems enabled by AI.
And now, moving to the economic trends. Well, most of the economic growth is actually bad for the environment due to the fact that there is a misalignment between economic actors. So this issue is what the emissions markets are trying to solve in a way. We have on the one side, they want to guide the consumption behavior, and on the other one, they want also to have an impact on the investment decisions in order to reach the climate goals. So for example, we have the EU ETS and the mandatory cap and trade systems that are actually expanding and maturing and are on track to reach the 43% greenhouse gas reduction, emissions reduction. And on the other hand, we also have a convergence of all reporting standards that are actually influencing the climate conscious resource allocation of these investments. And then with this standardization of the reporting, the certification, and also the measurements, and combining it together with the merging of the prices of the mandatory and the voluntary market, it's having a positive impact on environment. And then moving towards the energy sector. Well, here we have that we are facing a shift towards more renewable resources, or actually energy sources. This is due to the fact that it is supported by the electricity market. And here we have the statistic that the energy sector has a 70% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So actually more electrification and more renewable energy resources are needed to tackle these greenhouse emissions. There may be legislations that incentivize the investments and that further and reduce the initial costs, setup costs. And nevertheless, we face a deficit in the design of the electrification system, and we need a redesign of the electrical grids in order to be more efficient in that way.
So the innovative ways business models create and capture value will have a significant impact in how we tackle climate change. Together we have identified two business model trends. The first one being PaaS, product as a service. That is replacing end-of-life concept and enabling circular economy value chains. The idea is to replace, reduce, reuse, and also recover materials in the business process. And this incentivizes businesses to produce products, materials, components of the highest utility and also value. And by changing the way we produce and also consume to double global circularity, we can reduce the material footprint by as much as 28%. And what are key drivers in this area? It's the fact that there are supporting political factors, and also that businesses see that they're able to increase profitability when they reduce the amount of components that they actually manufacture and produce them of higher quality. The second trend is climate adaptation. Recall the scenes of destruction, stories of people losing their homes and everything last year as massive floods swept through Western Germany. And this is one of many proofs that climate change is here to stay, and it is bound to happen again. So what we need to do is be able to predict the intensity of such climate change better so that we are more resilient from an environmental perspective. And here, increasingly, startups are using AI to provide more accurate predictions for climate disasters, and providing services in the form of early warning systems, disaster response, and also climate insurance. And what's driving this? It's the amount of litigation against companies that are not climate responsible, and also the huge loss of life as well as property damage that could be avoided if we had the better measures in place. And with that, I hand it over back to my colleagues.
Thank you very much. The second phase was the scenario phase. So now we've seen all the trends that we've identified, but we wanted to look more into detail of what actually drives the trends. And those drivers that we identified led us to the scenarios we then wrote up. So the goal was to write 4 scenarios that can show you the life of a person in 2042, so exactly in 20 years. We started by looking at the 27 trends that we've just identified and going deeper on the driver level. So we identified 70 plus drivers, and through a process of different frameworks, votings, we ended up with 11 most relevant drivers that we will go into more detail.
But what exactly does relevant mean? In our case, relevant means highly impactful and also highly uncertain in terms of in what way the driver will evolve in the future. And thus, they're decisive on how the future will look like. So the first thing that we did is try to assess or assign a certain degree of impactfulness and uncertainty to each of the drivers that we identified. And probably former Centerlings can agree with me that then in a very long voting session and discussion session, we had a closer look at each single driver that we identified and tried to assess how everyone in our class expects this specific aspect of the future to evolve. And let me tell you, there were multiple times where I personally thought that the voting would be unanimous, or at least close to unanimous, and it was completely spread. So again, a sign that the future has so many more facets than you initially think. On the left side over here, you can then see that we put every single driver in one of the 4 quadrants, depending on high impact, low impact, high uncertainty, or low uncertainty. And the 11 drivers that were classified as highly uncertain and highly impactful, you can see over the top of my head, I guess, in this quadrant over here. When you read the different bullets, you can see that we looked at various different topics, some of them related to climate change per se, such as the supply of sustainable products, the attractiveness of ESG investments, or resource scarcity. But we also looked at other drivers that are on the top of our minds, such as data access or also political topics, including urbanization and inequality. In the end, we decided for 2 key drivers to go with for our scenarios, them being geopolitical dynamics and climate commitment. Those 2 drivers, in our opinion, are independent of each other and in combination, most relevant for the future scenarios that we wanted to build.
So now we want to teach you a bit about these 2 key drivers, because they were the most important factors when actually coming up with the scenarios in the end. Geopolitical dynamics for us is mostly focusing on governments and companies across the world and how they interact on global issues, for example, climate change. We see that for global prioritization, so the extreme on the right, we have a situation where global companies and nations actually cooperate on every dimension. They see climate change as a common problem. They want to solve it together. They interact on a very, very open level. They share technology, so developing and developed countries actually collaborate. You don't have a dispersity in technology access, which is for overall a pretty good scenario. But on the other hand, you also have this extreme. You have the national prioritization, where companies actually move more inwards. They focus on themselves. They don't really try to solve climate crisis anymore, but rather cope with it, adapt it. We have a higher dispersity between tech, both on we're looking at the developing and developed nations, and overall countries focus on themselves, less trade in that scenario.
The second driver that we chose to go with is climate commitment, and in our case, individual climate commitment. So how committed are individuals to actually take action and solve, or at least try to solve, the climate crisis? As actually a majority of the emissions can be accounted for individual behavior, we decided that this is one of the key drivers to go with. If we look at the high climate commitment part, we see a side where people are really seeing that climate change is an issue and they're willing to change something, so actually also sacrifice something, reducing, for example, maybe their living standards in order to be more sustainable and beneficial for the climate and the world that we're living in. And actually, committed individuals also lead to committed governments, as it's the people who elect them. On the other side, we see a lack of commitment, mainly due to resignation, polarization, and inflation. People simply believe it's too late to take action. we cannot really change anything anymore. So people don't really act sustainable, don't really chose to go for the sustainable solutions, which also results in governments acting less sustainable, companies and countries exploiting natural resources, leading to even more severe resource scarcity than we already have, and also in insane price rises and as a result.
So as a last step in the scenario phase, we draw up these 4 scenarios, depending on the 2 key drivers. We actually wanted to build scenarios that are very extreme, but very plausible. So we based everything on realistic scenarios or research. We see that during the research phase, some scenarios turn out to be very positive, very favorable, which we could really imagine ourselves living in the future. But we also saw that there are a lot of scenarios which are very drastic and sad. For example, my team worked on the worst case scenario, and I can tell you that for the 1 week, every evening was pretty sad, and we had to drink or play kicker to actually cope with it. In the end, we came up with the 4 scenarios, which will be presented now in more detail. We have the Towards One Green World, in which we have a global prioritization and a high commitment, and as well as failure of green colonialism and falling together, which is kind of a mixture, and then a hot, isolated depression, which teaches you more about how anything will evolve if we don't take action now. And with that, I brought Lily, Alvaro, Chris, and Stefan, who will go into more detail.
Yes, to start on a positive note, we're starting in the top right quadrant, which is kind of the best case scenario. So we have a high individual climate commitment, and we also have a global prioritization in terms of geopolitics. But what does a day or what does life in 2042 in this scenario actually look like? So we have a look at the high climate commitment. This actually means that people in their everyday behavior engage in sustainable behavior. This goes from wearing sustainable materials like blazers from recycled plastic yarn to your everyday food consumption. So most people are going to be plant-based and also consume local food, so no more avocado toast or Argentinian steaks. People are living in green cities, so everything is based on renewable energy, and also take very green public transport modes. For example, there's a Hyperloop from Thun to Amsterdam in our scenario. Then looking more on the global prioritization side. So for us, we identified that the UN will gain a lot of power. So the UN is comprised of most states, so this actually makes a lot of sense. And also technology and solutions are scaled towards the world. So it's not only for developing countries, but also for developed countries, but also developing countries can actually really benefit from that. And then maybe looking at the combination, what does it mean? So the UN basically sets a 2% contribution of GDP towards climate change as an analogy to the NATO contribution we currently have. And also there are a lot of global climate initiatives. So it's not only the EU, but it's together with the UNASUR or the African Union. We, in our scenario, identified a global standardized CO2 budget. So you can kind of imagine you have your smartwatch on, and then it also automatically recognizes your behavior and rewards you with carbon credits and lets you then pay things with it. But you can also get deducted carbon credits for bad behavior. Yeah, all in all, this sounds maybe very positive, but we still experience resource scarcity, so we can't really solve the problem of limited resources. However, circular economy is actually managing it pretty well, and that's why in 2042, in our scenario, we are living in a world better than ever before and moving towards a more green world.
All right, moving on to the top left quadrant. Our scenario is called Failure of Green Colonialism. Before we actually get to why we believe that this scenario is actually a failure, let's talk a bit more about green colonialism. As you can see, we're on the axis where we are at national prioritization, which is why we believe that one of the main characteristics of this scenario is the vast discrepancy in how individual countries actually prioritize climate change. We believe that developed countries, which have high access to technology and can also count with a high commitment from the society side, will actually be able to really tackle climate change in efficient ways, while developing countries might even rather prioritize their own growth. So in countries that are currently not part of our Western world, we might see a second industrial revolution leading to way higher emissions. Now, with the national prioritization, what we also believe is that there will no longer be supranational agreements that are not kind of a win-win situation. Taking it to an extreme, we believe that the EU will cease to exist the way it has been so far, and we will see a split into kind of the fast EU and the slow EU. And that kind of is an analogy for the entire world as well. As you can see here, the world is going to be split into rather the developed nations, which are trapped in their kind of green bubbles and are really focused on climate adaptation, meaning they want to kind of make sure that within their own border, climate change effects are reduced, but that kind of leads them to also ignore what's going on beyond their own borders and globally when it comes to climate change effects. That is why we believe that ultimately it will be a failure of green colonialism, because climate change is a global problem, and it's not enough for developed countries to just focus on their own problems and try to reach their own climate targets, but we actually have to all pull in one string towards, making climate change a little less of an issue.
Okay, so now let's look at this very dystopian scenario. So basically, the consequences of climate change are very real and very severe, and individuals as well as governments respond to that by adapting rather than fighting against the sources of it. To make it more concrete, if you look at the axis of individual commitment, we first look at developing countries where people need to sustain their basic needs and thus have not the capability to pay any green premiums for more sustainable products. If you look at already developed countries, people want to remain the lifestyle. Because resource scarcity is higher and higher, all they focus on is remaining a lifestyle and not on any sustainability concerns. If you look at the other axis of prioritization and at national prioritization, more concrete, we see that governments and companies build dams to fight floods, to fight rising sea levels, that we invest into genetically modified crops to fight and combat droughts, and so on and so on. So maybe interesting in this scenario is a possible chain of events that would lead us to that. So with resource scarcity, prices increase, inflation increases, the lifestyle of people stagnates and decreases, they are more vulnerable towards misinformation. Governments then also need to adapt their legislation to ease the economic burden of their population, and so on and so on. We also then see the first countries leaving transnational agreements, such as the European Union and others, and ultimately this will lead to this lower left corner we're in. So to sum it up, companies and individuals focus on adaptation and on the consequences rather than fighting the sources.
Thank you, Chris. So now I hope to end on a slightly better note than the picture that Chris just painted for us. So let me introduce the fourth scenario to you, falling together. So here we have a low individual commitment towards fighting climate change, while at the same time having a global prioritization on the geopolitical level. Due to the lacking commitment that we see from individuals, we also expect that neither economic or political players will implement sufficient measures to drastically reduce the carbon emissions that we currently face and therefore tackle climate change. However, this doesn't mean that no green or sustainable products will be used at all. For those where already today we can see cost efficiency, they will still be used and adopted widely. One example for that would be renewable energy sources, because due to the technological advances in the last 2 decades, solar and wind energy are cheaper today than fossil fuels. This is one example where we still expect that those energy sources will rise in the future. Now, looking at the second axis, where we have the global prioritization, we expect that this global prioritization or global coordination will be driven by economic factors. Signs that we're actually moving towards this direction could be that the current signs of localism and also protectionism are vanishing, and a few years later we'll have a global free trade treaty ratified. Now, if we assume that both of these drivers are actually facing and going towards these two outcomes, what would life be like in 2042? First of all, the life would be heavily impacted by the effects of climate change. So there would be a rising number of extreme weather events, and some areas on our Earth would even become uninhabitable. This again will lead to large-scale migration, and relocation would become something more frequent and more normal. However, we do believe that this migration can actually be managed because of the global cooperation that we're seeing. On the technological side, we believe that technologies will be mostly used and developed to mitigate the effects of climate change instead of fighting climate change itself. To sum it up, life in 2042 in this scenario, well, you'll be living in a highly interconnected and globalized community, yet because of the destruction of Mother Earth, life on Earth would be really hard and harder than ever before. And now I think I can give it back to our CAs.
And now we're entering the final stage, our ideation phase. During the final weeks of the course, we wanted to create meaningful ideas that aim tackling climate change in the AI era, in this today and in 20 years' time. And together with professional help from IICM, the Institute for Innovation and Change Methodology, we use proven techniques and methodologies to find ideas that provide value in the field of tackling climate change in the AI era. So we started with more than 250 ideas, and then we decided on the 25 best ideas. And after several iterations and discussions, and then together with our project partner, the Bavarian AI Council and the Bavarian State Ministry of Digital Affairs, we came to the 5 final ideas, the best ones that we said we would like to explore even further for their business potential. And these business ideas are namely Verdero, as you see on the slide, Savever, Redrop, City Twin, and Meet AI. And now we're really excited to present to you the ideas that the teams came up with. And now we hand over to the team number 1 with a pitch on Meet.
So this is Munich in a few years. What you see here is the design plan for 2 skyscrapers that are actually going to be built right over there if they follow through with the plan. The buildings are supposed to be constructed in an environmentally friendly way and sustainably. But when we think about the impact on the city climate, it's actually really unsure how it will change. There are several dimensions that need to be taken into account. First of all, pollution. Maybe these buildings will change the way the pollution is distributed throughout the city. Second of all, wildlife. There certainly will be an impact on the wildlife, for example, birds flying around. And third of all, buildings and the way they're spaced impacts the way those release and absorb solar energy, meaning that high buildings oftentimes trap heat alongside their walls, which cannot be released, essentially causing heat islands in a city. So what we see is city planning is quite complex. But when we talk about city planning and city planning gone wrong in the context of climate change, we call it climate maladaptation. The problem with this is that projects are oftentimes just built on the paper without really taking into account the surroundings. And there are several reasons for that. First of all, there's a lack of data, because city planners and urban governments do not take into account all the available data. Second of all, there's a lack of experts, because interpreting the data is actually as important as gathering it. And third of all, there's a lack of holistic models, because let's face it, climate and climate change and planning is really complex, and there are a lot of dimensions to it which cannot be really taken into account. And this is why we're super excited to introduce City Twin AI to you, with which we hope to tackle all the problems I have just described.
All right. So we are now having a look at a very early demo of a product. We're currently zooming into the location where the 2 skyscrapers we just introduced are actually planned to be built. And the green dots we can see are actually local emission hotspots, so how polluted is a certain area. And what we can now do with our tool, we can basically simulate certain changes in the digital twin. So we can, for example, place a building there, the building we just had planned, and then we can evaluate what is the impact on the local emission hotspots we just saw in the city, and then we can assess what the impact is and what we think of this, whether we should now do the project or whether we should not do the project. Next off, what are the two, or product basically offers like two interfaces. The main one is the Urban Twin Simulator. This is the part we just had a look at. It's basically the tool that urban planners can use to do certain changes in a digital twin of their city, and which will basically give them a tool to evaluate and assess the impact of certain changes on the environment. And the second interface of a product that we offer is actually a tool to better communicate with citizens or also with high-level stakeholders. So a tool where changes in the city are supposed to be made like visually appealing and communicatable in a very easy way. Let's dive a bit deeper into a product, into the three core features basically. On the one hand, we have the digital twin basically and all the data that is needed to create it. So we first build on data provided by the governments or by map providers, for example, and then we can enrich that data with satellite imagery or also with LiDAR data, for example, to create 3D representations of buildings. The second part are the models themselves. So there are current climate models developed out there, and the plan is to utilize them and apply them to the data that we have on our own side. And third, we plan to cooperate with climate experts leading in research so that we're always up to date and have the latest insight into what's going on. For example, currently there's a model developed in Hamburg, the MITAS model, which we can then utilize. And what's in for the city? On the one hand, first of all, it's more uniform planning of what's going on in the city and of certain changes, and gives the city even a tool to do so and simulate things. And then second, it's like an impact assessment on the climate, which is something which is currently a very manual task, and we can automate that. And third, it's increased transparency, so we allow for better communication with both citizens, but also high-level governmental stakeholders.
All right, then now let's take a look at how we make money. Basically, we have three pillars for this. The first one, at the start of a project, is the implementation phase. So we need to do the data acquisition to actually create the digital twin, do some setup, run the simulations, and also educate our customers, the cities, on how to actually use it. As this is rather complex, this is separate from our subscriptions, which make up the main part of our revenue. So for this, cities have to pay an annual fee to use our services, use the simulations, and so on. If they also want to share the simulations with third parties, they also have to pay a little bit more. And then finally, we also have consulting services, as we already employ climate experts for our for the development of our product. We also offer to create higher fidelity simulations or just some guidance on that. Let's take a look at our market now. So in the first phase, we focus on the DACH region, so Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and on large cities. And assuming that we earn 2.5 million per city per year, this leads to a total market of 300 million euros. As we can see that there are 25% of those cities have the Green Party in the city council, we assume that this is our serviceable addressable market, as they are interested in those city twins and climate adaptation technologies. And then we assume that we get 50% of this market, which results in a serviceable addressable obtainable market of 37.5 million. And just as a reference, the German government actually spends 350 million per year on smart city projects, so we think this is quite reasonable, actually maybe even conservative estimate.
Great, so let's talk about how our product fits into the scenarios that we were just introduced to. On the side of global prioritization, we see that CityTwin.ai fits in quite positively, particularly when there's also high individual climate commitment. In this scenario, we'll see both climate adaptation and mitigation, whereas when there's low individual commitment, we will only see climate adaptation. Moving towards the axis in which there is national prioritization, we still believe that City Twin is a net positive, although it's slightly less positive than when there's global prioritization, and especially when there's low individual commitment as well. So let's talk about the roadmap that we're operating on. In 2025, we hope to pilot our product in Bavaria. By 2027, we'd like to expand to the full DACH region and also include rural and suburban communities in our models.
By 2030, we would like to expand all throughout the EU and also begin offering the consulting services that we mentioned earlier. By 2032, we have our final goal of expanding fully globally with the ambitious goal of providing consulting for the UN as they continue to shape their climate policies. That's it for our product. We hope you are as excited to learn about it as we were excited to develop it, and we'll be taking questions now.
Just raise your hand if you have any questions.
So I wonder who will be paying for this. You said the cities could pay. I think there could perhaps be another really interesting plan, potential kind of business here, and this is that the project planners have to use your tool because the city mandates it. So did you think about kind of the city mandating using your tool, and that kind of the private parties who want to build like an office tower so have to make an assessment and use your tool for it?
So the question was basically if there wouldn't also be like other customer groups, for example, was it commercial planners of buildings, for example, who could also by the city be mandated to use the tool. So actually this is also something we looked into. We find that, first of all, the big problem with the product, or the big challenge, is basically to come up with the initial digital twin. And for that, like a big upfront investment is needed. And I mean, this is something which most likely like project developers won't like do upfront. So we rather see the city in the position to do so. And then the city can mandate them. We also thought about licensing it to the project developers, basically. But we saw the biggest market like on the city side, and if they make it mandatory, I mean, we also have to see like if we charge from the city, then we can't charge from everyone basically who using the product. So to increase adoption rate, the plan was to sell it to the city and then bring other people on board from there.
Basically, you take everything into account. Like, for example, if this building is going to have 20,000 workers there because it's an office building, these people are going to have to leave somewhere. You know, all that stuff is inside the algorithm or whatever, and then it calculates the outcome, the future outcome, right?
So you're asking if we're taking like all available data, or what kind of available data we're taking into account?
Whether it's really everything.
Well, we are, so we are focused mostly on climate change and how certain infrastructure, for example, building new transport routes or building like high buildings, constructing new buildings, etc., how that will impact the climate in a city. So more on the microclimate level, so what is actually going around in the surroundings. But we're not, for example, saying, okay, we need 20,000 workers for that building, we need like places for them to stay. We're really focusing on the environmental impact.
I think that will be very, very critical in the environment, because you're going to need maybe 10,000 more houses, or I don't know, I mean, it's actually an important thing. If you're going to have a place where, I don't know, X thousand number of people are going to be coming to Munich, new people, they don't have where to live, because actually in Munich you don't find anything free, so you're going to have to build it. And that means impact, I'm guessing, right? With something like that. I'm talking specifically about this building there that you probably have already studied or something, I don't know.
I see the point definitely. We said for the first version of the product, so it's like going to be an iteration. We can't do everything from the beginning. We focus on like the climate models, and actually there are models out there already who can, for example, assess like wind flows through like canyons in the city, like through the skyscraper canyons. And then there's also like models for like flora and fauna, how they develop under certain conditions. So the plan is to start from there and bring the models from research basically and deploy it on actual data. That's the plan for the first round.
And I think that's actually all the questions that we have time for, but we'll be around to talk to after the presentation. And coming up next, I'd like to introduce the next team to talk to us a little bit about food.
I have a question for you. Who here does eat meat? Please show me a quick show of hands. Okay. Whoa, this was a lot. So you actually like meat. And you will be happy to hear that you're not the only ones. Around 86% of the world population eat meat on a regular basis. But as you're all also very informed, you know that the world is going to, or the worldwide standard of people living is rising. So also the demand for meat will be rising because we have a global rise of the social middle class. As you're also very well informed about the problems of meat consumption, we also have a lot of people here that probably are vegetarian or vegan. And they know about problems such as the global greenhouse gas emissions related to meat. So to produce 1 kilogram of beef meat, we need 100 kilograms of CO2 equivalents that are emitted for that. And also the related animal cruelty that we can find in the meat industry because of its high integration is not to be forgotten. So, as meat eater, you might ask, what are the alternatives? Vegetarian and vegan people will answer to you, eat plant-based meat. This is a valid point, but the problem here is also that this meat needs cultivable area. And this area is decreasing worldwide. So around 1/3 of the worldwide cultivable area is already degenerating because of human activities. And here is where I propose you to eat air meat. Our product. This product is based on CO2 or protein powder made out of CO2. It's very beef-alike, as you can see. And it's also completely cruelty-free because there are no animals that have been killed for that. And if you're interested in the production process, we read about that.
Yeah, so why don't you give it to our chef, the steak, and we see if you can actually taste it. So maybe that's a good idea. So this one is not working. So making meat out of CO2, that sounds a little bit odd, right? So how do we actually do that? We partner up with companies who actually take carbon dioxide out of the air, and then in a second step, use microorganisms to produce protein powder out of that CO2. That's actually technology that is here right now. And we then use that protein powder to make actual meat. So what does account for the juiciness and the spiciness of real meat? That is found in the fibrinous structure of the meat. So it's very thin fibers that are aligned to make up for these sensory aspects. So how do we do that? We use our fibrilline technology. That means we start off with a protein powder and use a process called electrospinning to spin very thin fibers out of protein. We then use MRI scans of real meat to generate an AI-based CAD model of the fiber alignment, and we then align the very thin fibers into the pattern of real meat. The third step is just UV cross-linking, and we get the final highly texturized air meat product, which is very juicy, very tasty, very spicy. And the crucial thing is it is a bottom-up approach, so we have individual fibers aligned, unlike our competitors who just do big protein blocks and then tear them apart to get some sort of structure.
Exactly. You will find those competitors in the lower left corner here. But there are also other companies who are actually having a improved meat texture as well. But the problem is that the product is actually soy-based and therefore not as eco-friendly. We also have competitors in the upper left corner, and they are more eco-friendly, but on the other hand, do have not this improved meat texture. And this is what actually sets Meat AI apart from them. Going into our business model, we are focusing on two pillars. The one is actually our B2C e-commerce, where we will set up an online website where the end consumer can directly buy the product. We are also having this B2B wholesale, where we will directly sell the product to organic supermarkets.
So let's have a look at the market size. The global meat and meat substitute market is estimated at 295 billion annually, euros, and the amount of plant-based meat and meat substitutes is growing by 15% annually. Given that, we expect our revenue in 5 years to be at around 66.7 million euros. In the German market, that's where we are going to start, and taking also into the account only the amount of people that is already focusing on lowering their meat consumption in their diet.
So we have a significant market, and we expect to succeed in 3 different scenarios. So let's start with the top right, our most favorable scenario, where there's high climate commitment and countries are united in tackling climate change together. And we expect our Meat AI product to be available in supermarket chains all over the world, and climate enthusiasts are rushing to get our product. And on the top left corner, where climate commitment is still high and Germany is more of a closed economy, we'll be targeting a niche market where we'll be selling to organic supermarket chains in Germany. And in the bottom right, where climate commitment is low, we'll be able to still target a niche market and selling our product more to restaurants all over the world. And in the bottom left corner, where we expect our product demand of our original product to reduce, we still expect to be profitable as we pivot our company to become a meat processing company. And how do we bring this product to market? We want to start our production processes by mid-2023, and then expect to open up our online shops in 2023, and then sell to our first bio supermarkets in 2024. And who's behind this amazing air meat product? Meet the team, a diverse group of individuals passionate about air meat and also meat alternatives. Sven, what happened? What happened to the steak that we cooked?
Let me check. Oh, thank you, Peter. Okay, so here we have it, and actually you can try out for yourself if you want some.
In our
vegan.
product, taste it, bite into it, savor its taste. It's so juicy and it's meaty, you won't believe it's made out of air. And now we're open to questions. Yeah, Igor?
How expensive is the production of such a product in terms of energy consumption?
So to recap your question, you're asking about the production costs related to the energy consumption?
Yeah, probably I'll go for that. Basically, we have optimized our production. First of all, right now we are still in the research phase. So we have some prototype, as you could just taste. We are still optimizing for the production costs, which is a topic, that's true. Currently, we aim for having like a normal beefsteak, just like you saw, to about €8 in sale, which is sort of expensive still, but we are actually using process mining to lower the costs to get around €4. So in price per kilo or something like that?
Yeah, you're trying to save CO2, and you have to have accordingly production process which saves CO2 in comparison to normal meat or other meat alternatives.
Okay, now I get it. So basically, a big part of our technology process is actually chemical or biochemical. So for that, we, for example, put the protein powder into a solution to spin the very thin fibers out of that. So that is not so energy intensive. The more energy intensive part will be the alignment of those machines. But because we have quite big production facilities, we can compound our production processes to basically make them efficient. So it's handleable in terms of the production energy consumption. Yeah, so basically we partner with other companies who do that already. There are companies like Air Protein or Solar Foods who do exactly that. So our business is focused on texturizing the meat. That is, we use protein powder to then texturize. So that is not directly part of our production process yet, or right now. So probably that's something we need to address, or you need to address to them. Right now, they can deliver sufficient quantities for our production in the scale we have right now for the German market.
We can take one last question.
I'll split my question into two parts. So as you want to sell B2C directly, how will you do the shipping? So is there some cooling process involved? And then how do you reach your customers? So how is your marketing working?
Okay. So to recap, the question for the virtual audience is how we would target our B2C customers and how we address that in terms of cooling and also shipping.
All right, so cooling is needed for the product in the end, and we agreed that we are having a rather large durability of our product, and therefore we will rather ship in large quantities to avoid huge transportation costs. We would directly address organic supermarkets at the beginning, and in terms of marketing, we've been thinking about like setting up a person who is responsible for strategic partnerships at the beginning, but we've also thinking about other marketing channels, social media, and so on.
Okay. Unfortunately, that's all the questions we can take, but we'd be happy to answer any more during the break. Thank you.
Thank you very much, team number 2, with super product of Meet AI. And now we will have a 15 minutes break, but before that, I would like to have a short talk to take 5 minutes of your time. So basically, I will read, sorry for that. So this trend seminar was special for me in many dimensions. So one reason of them is a war in my home country, Ukraine. And first of all, thank you for everyone from all the world and Germany in particular who are helping, hosting families, who are donating money, who are bringing food and equipment. I saw it at all volunteering points around Munich and Polish border, and it's beautiful to see the strength of this solidarity. However, today is the 50th day of this brutal war, and with no end in sight. With every more days of this terrible war, the number of civilians killed, the number of murdered kids, raped women, as well as many more horrible statistics is increasing. Check some pictures from Bucha, Irpin, Kramatorsk, or Chernihiv. I'm sure you will learn the geography of Ukraine very fast if this war continues. The Ukrainian army, volunteers, and citizens are all heroes. They are fighting for our country, for our nation. And all of us here, because who knows which country will be the next one. Now, Ukrainians need your help as individuals, as well as representatives from your institution. Think for a second about whether you have done something already or how much you are willing to step out from your comfort zone. As an individual, you can do much, you can do a lot. So you can donate, you can host families, you can be buddy of a refugee, you could go to demonstration or simply spread the word among your community or circles. Ukrainians need medicine, medical equipment, body armors, helmets, and many, many more. As a business or government institution, you can extend your Fridays for Future initiative for Fridays for Ukraine, or Thursdays, Saturdays, or any other day. Allocate resources for your employees to work, create initiatives, translate your websites, or cooperate with established NGOs and open source projects, and offer them your support. If you have a will to do something for Ukraine, but don't know how, please write to me, or call to me, or talk to me. Don't stay aside, fight on your own level. Any actions matter. Please stand with Ukraine and for Ukraine. Slava Ukraini! And with that note, we move to the break of 15 minutes. And here I collected some resources for you, which you may check in between or at home, so up to you. Thank you. Now that the break is over, let's talk about why it's getting hot here and what can we do about it. And the next team will present you something.
Okay, quick show of hands. Who of you is feeling too warm right now? That's what I thought. So actually, we checked all the heaters, and right now, most of them are on level 3. The thing is, they have already been on level 3 when the room looked like this, and they probably still will be on level 3 when the room looks like this. But actually, when you think about it, all of the people in here and also the people on the picture are producing body heat. So we should ask the question, why are we not considering this fact? Why are we not considering space utilization when we talk about room temperature? When we think about a room with 100 square meters and we fill it with 80 people, then the room temperature will probably rise by 1.5 degrees within 1 hour. And why is that a problem? It's a problem because you will probably be freezing or feeling too warm, but it's also a problem because energy consumption in commercial real estate is responsible for 6.6% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And right now, we're wasting a lot of this energy because we're trying to keep rooms on a constant temperature level, even though they're sometimes empty for several days in a row. And we're also trying to adjust the temperature when there's like fluctuations because of human behavior, like you're opening the window and there's just like different space utilization at different points in time. And that's a huge issue because of course there are thermostats that try to keep the temperature at a constant level, but they can only react to the fluctuations after they've happened, but they can't do it beforehand. And that's also an issue not only of heating, but it's a topic of air conditioning, it's a topic of electricity, of warm water. And as a consequence, this leads to excessive and above all unnecessary costs. And in fact, we already have a lot of systems that are able to solve these single issues, but there is not one single solution out there that is capable of integrating all the single systems that are out there and is able to make use of the data that we already have. And this is exactly where we come in the game. So we're very happy to present to you Saveva, which is our software solution for revolutionizing building energy systems.
Okay, so how do we revolutionize the energy industry? Well, we built an add-on software for smart thermostats, but also smart lighting elements, as you can see on the top left, top right. And, well, those hardware elements already exist, right? So they are in charge of the heaters, they are in charge of the light bulbs, and adjust them according to the required necessities of the customer. So what we did is tackle the issue that they work individually and that they are not efficient enough. So we want to extract this add-on efficiency with our software. How we do this? We developed this software and we integrate all devices over the air into one single framework. With that, we provide, on the one hand, more transparency, so the end customer knows how is the energy consumption going. And on the other hand, we also develop a user interface to monitor everything and provide a more efficient use of our heating, lighting elements in an integrated manner. So what we want to achieve is to be a united facilitation management tool that saves up to 30% of the costs and saves up thus also energy and also lowers the greenhouse gas emissions by doing that. So who are our customers? So we are a B2B business and mainly focus on office tenants, property managers, and governments. Why we do this? Well, these three customer groups all share one common factor, and that is that they have big conference rooms, big spaces, and those spaces are really used inefficiently.
But what would be a good product if we couldn't sell it, right? So how do we bring our product to the three customer groups we just heard of? We have basically two main distribution channels over which we can accelerate our sales enormously. On the one hand side, we have the hardware producers of smart thermostats and smart electricity pockets, where we resell their hardware and lay our software as a top layer solution on top of that, and thus increasing their value. So they have an incentive to promote us and act as a distribution channel. On the other side, we have the energy providers, so for example the Stadtwerke München here, where we integrate the accounting and the utility billing of the energy and electricity directly in our software, so they save a lot of time and effort in these regards, and also can act as a sales and distribution channel for us. Now let's take a look into our product. So here you can see a dashboard of our product, and you can see that we have the office occupation in there, so we know at every point of time how many people are in which room. We have the concrete weather data, and we also have the calendar integrated. So we know in advance of upcoming meetings. And why is that important? Well, through this, we can adjust the heating and electricity not only during the days, but already days and weeks beforehand and in advance, and thus saving the company a lot of emissions and then costs in the end. Diving a little bit deeper into the features of our product, we can see that we have integrated the accounting and utility billing. And remember, this is exactly why the energy providers act as a distribution channel for us. And on the other side, we have integrated the carbon emissions tracking, which will be then directly transferred to the ESG reporting tools, and saving the company a lot of manual work.
So, what makes Saveva special? While there are already some providers of smart energy systems out there, Saveva is uniquely positioned because we are the only ones offering integration of heating, cooling, energy and water, as well as further integrations with other services. How do we earn money? There are two main revenue streams for Saveva. First, there's subscriptions for our customers. They pay monthly based on their office space, and there's a subscription tier. In the basic tiers, there are all the core features, and we offer an advanced Climate Hero tier with ESG reporting integration. The second revenue stream is commissions from hardware manufacturers, which we bundle with our software, and we get a share of their sales. So what's the addressable market? Basically, companies spend a huge amount on heating, cooling, electricity and water for German offices each year, and we believe Saveva can save up to 30% of that. And these saved costs could be our revenue.
All right, let's look on how our product evolves. So our first proof of concept already saves 15% of energy costs and ships with the heating solution within this quarter of Q2 22. We will add electricity and water by the end of this year, and we will also partner up with the heating providers and the suppliers of smart thermostat in Q3 22. So how does our business is affected by different scenarios? So baseline is we save costs for our customers, and so they are inclined to use our solution. However, if you look at the climate commitment axis, for us it's easier to sell the solution if you're in the top right corner, because not only are companies interested in saving costs, they also want to save resources. There also exists more legislation in that round and so on. If you look at the other axis regarding national prioritization, it's harder for us to expand across borders because of different legislation, different technical standards. So our team of diverse specialists is happy to answer your questions, and maybe next trend seminar presentation, we will sit in this room with more smart use of resources.
In our startup, we installed like smart meters, or not the smart, like the smart thermostats, and kind of just programmed them saying, like at 8 in the morning, please heat up to 20 degrees, and in the evening, move back to 16 degrees. So do you really think you can save so much on top compared to like this baseline? Because I think the 30% that you were mentioning this sounds more that this is probably comparing to like heating all day and all night and over the weekends. And the question is kind of to have a fair comparison, you would have probably have it to compare it to the existing smart home solutions that are out there for purchase.
Okay, to repeat the question for the virtual audience, how much better are we than standard thermostat that you program to start at 6 a.m. and end at 8 p.m.?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The point you are referring to is you have to manually program at which time the thermostat goes up, goes down, and so on. Kind of the cool thing of our solution is that we see all of these things influencing the temperature in a room automatically. So we know how many people are in this room because we have integrated the calendar and have seen already weeks in advance, okay, this afternoon here is blocked. We have integrated the weather data and so on and have seen, okay, today is 21 degrees, so probably we don't need to heat it all today. This is the one part. And the other part where our solution is really strong in, and what's our USP is, that we not only focus on the heating, but also have the electricity, the warm water, and so on, all included, and kind of also optimize these systems. Of course, the heating part is the most, let's say, visual and most easy one to understand, but also in electricity and warm water and so on, we have a huge saving potential.
Okay, the question was to explain the warm water part again.
So basically in centrally heated buildings, you have a boiler in the basement and that heats the warm water and pumps it around the house. So everywhere in the house you have warm water available as soon as you open the tap. But in days where no one is in the office, you don't even need to heat the water in the first place and pump it all around the house. You could just stop doing that, for example.
How does it help to know like a week or months in advance about an appointment?
Okay, the question was, how does knowing an appointment in advance by 1 week help to predict heating?
Yeah, basically we know that because of two ways. The first way is we have the calendar integrated, and the MPD, for example, the final presentation here was already planned a lot of weeks ago, the final date. And the other thing is, and we have an AI model analyzing the office occupation. So we know kind of during the year where the peak phases are, where the most people are in the office, and where the least people are in the office. So we are getting better the more we use our system to predict kind of the occupation in the office.
All right, and with that, we would like to hand over to Verdeo, and they will show you how to tackle one of the biggest polluter that's out there.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Let me start with a quick question. So who of you has used something that requires electricity already today? Quick show of hands. And now maybe think about how many times you used something that requires electricity. I bet it's a lot of times, because it doesn't matter what you do, if it's your phone, your laptop, taking food out of your fridge, or taking the metro here. Basically, everything we do requires energy and electricity. But this rising dependency on electricity is actually quite bad, because let me tell you that energy generation is responsible for 2/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. So this is a pretty big number, and it also offers a pretty big reduction potential, and we need to capture this reduction potential because greenhouse gas emissions, and specifically CO2 emissions from energy generation, have been increasing and are on their highest level ever. So last year, the emissions increased by 6%, which represents 2 gigatons to 36 gigatons of CO2 emissions, not considering other greenhouse gases. And this is mostly to an increased use of fossil fuels such as natural gas or coal. This kind of contradicts a bit with, with the 40% renewable share we already have in Germany, which has been increasing during the last years. However, the carbon intensity of products is actually stagnating, and that's due to the energy control problem, because renewables are actually pretty hard to manage. So first of all, they're intermittent, so this means they're not there all the time, so you need a lot of storage for it, which is really difficult for the main grid. And second of all, they are dependent on a lot of factors. So you can't really control them with traditional systems, and that's why we at Verdeo are leveraging AI for more reliable green microgrids.
Yes, we are Verdeo, and we are on a mission. Our mission is to make microgrids the #1 producer and consumer of energy. We want to make microgrids the next standard for energy consumption, and we want to make this in a very flexible and modular way. So we target customers who can, with our platform, choose different modules from a microgrid and actually get it to their homes or to their plants online and in a very short time. We make a lot of promises. Most of our promises are focused on their flexibility and on the independency from the normal grid. So for example, we can actually promise that your energy from our microgrid is 100% zero emissions. We can also promise you that we have a very good and even better AI-based software behind it, so that we can manage the power supply and demand even better to make the whole system more efficient. And also we want to focus a lot on resilience against natural like extreme weather events, as well as cybersecurity. But how does it actually work? In the middle of our program stands our software, which we will demo in just a second. But around that software, we have different modules that customers can choose from independently and flexibly within our product suite. Every customer will have a battery in their microgrid where they can store electricity when you have a lot of input and can extract energy during low input times, for example, at night or during winter. In addition to that, you have the renewable sources, for example, solar panels or windmills, for example. What actually makes Verdeo special, though, is that compared to other offers out there, our customers can actually choose from a marketplace within our product. So they don't have to take, for example, the Siemens suite in total, but they can choose which kind of supplier, which kind of price, which features they actually want related to their individual needs. And with that, everything is settled within a short amount of time in our platform, and that gets our motto, click, click, microgrid. So this company, this customer here, for example, is a shopping mall, and they wanted to have solar panels from Siemens and a battery from MTU, and with Verdeo, it's all possible, and our installment partners are on their way to install it right now.
Amazing. Now that we have a better understanding of what the components of a smart microgrid actually are, let's stay true to Leo's promise and have a look at our core software, our AI engine. Contrary to our competitors, which already say that they offer smart microgrids, they're actually logic-based. We want to move to a model-based microgrid. What does that actually mean? Well, our AI engine is kind of split into two different layers. First of all, we need to generate an exact digital twin of what the real-life microgrid actually looks like. In order to do that, on the one side, we gather a bunch of internal data, such as how the consumers actually interact with the microgrid, what the performance and consumption of the microgrid is at all times. And on the other side, we have external factors such as weather forecasts, electricity prices, and so on. Once we've done that, once we have a very clear understanding of what the microgrid is doing, how it's performing, how it's being interacted with, we can move on to optimizing. And that's where the AI actually comes in. All of these parts are automized. So our customer doesn't need to take care of grid stabilization. We automatically allocate the surplus energy. And our kind of standout feature is that we can actually predictively maintain the hardware components. Since we don't want this to be a complete black box, we actually decided to create a very user-friendly interface where the grid administrator can have a look at the key performance indicators. They can see how much is being produced at all times, how much of that is solar, how much of that is wind, and they can also see how much the individual buildings are consuming and what their electricity bills look like. So let's have a look at, for example, Digital Twin. This is a microgrid just south of Theresienwiese, and you could see, for example, that there would be 3 renewable source plants. 2 of them are solar. 1 of them, which is currently disconnected because it's not really windy outside, is wind. And then you can also have a look at how the individual households or buildings are consuming and performing. All right, with that being said, we actually target a wide segment of different customers. Anything that's compact, connected, and highly energy reliant can benefit from our solution. That can be office buildings, industrial sites, shopping malls, or even communities and private households.
Well, as you can see there, we are, of course, operating in a very big and growing market that is expected to be around 61 billion by 2027. And with that, we have a potential revenue of 1.5 billion. But how can we do that? Well, Basically, we offer two products that both include recurring revenues from our customers. First, we have the product as a service fee. That is, well, for customers, they can benefit from it with a combination of our hardware and software solution. And what does that actually mean? Well, Redrop charges a monthly fee that is dependent on the number and also the type of devices being installed. And as we want to ensure a smooth ride from start to finish, everything is included in this fee. Second, we have a software fee. So software is actually our core product. But yeah, what can we do with that? For example, we can upgrade existing microgrids with our smart AI-based solution. But not only we can make money with that, also our customers can benefit financially from it. And how can we do that? Well, first, with our AI controller, the consumption patterns can be optimized using, for example, future electricity prices, but also having information about weather and the grid load. Second, we can reduce, or then with that, we can reduce the actual annual energy costs up to 50%. Second, our customers can be rewarded by the conscious use of energy. But how is it working? Well, we can feed in surplus energy back to the grid, and we can also benefit then from a cashback, or our customers can benefit from a cashback. And last, as Redrop charges a monthly fee, we have no large upfront investment costs, and so a broader range of customers can have access to our product.
So, how can Redrop cope with the uncertainty that the future brings? As we heard at the very beginning, the energy sector is one of the main contributors to the global emission rate. This also means that the energy sector has the most potential of actually improving and going green and sustainable. Especially in the first two quadrants, where we have a high climate commitment, this is actually a sweet spot for Redrop, because we can not only tackle the global prioritization, but also the national one. So on the one side, we can benefit from global supply chains and also offer better pricing models and have easier access to the foreign suppliers. On the other side, if we look at those countries that are actually against globalization and that focus on national benefits, they also want to get rid of dependencies, especially when it comes to fossil fuels. Here, Redrop can offer independent solutions or independent energy solutions, and also give a robust and reliable microgrid systems. This is also one of the main advantages for this quadrant, where we have low commitment. However, due to the local prioritization, we still can enter the market and really make huge profits. As there is a lot of potential and a lot of opportunities, we also need to move quickly. This means that by the end of this year, we actually want to have a first working prototype and also establish the first contacts to potential buyers and potential suppliers. Then already starting from the 2023, we want to enter the German market first, and then expand to Europe, so that in a couple of years' time, we can tackle the whole world and really make the whole world green. These are very, very ambitious goals, but we are confident that Redrop can make it, and especially that society will be on our side, and that we can move or switch to using more sustainable sources. We thank you for your attention and are happy to take any questions that you might have.
Sure. For the audience, so the question was, how do we convince other suppliers to use our product instead of their own? It's a very difficult question to answer, because some companies that you saw are clearly already producing their own. If you look at the competitor landscape, for example, Siemens or Schneider Electric are quite advanced in the field. The problem we see is that especially companies who are developing new technology don't really have the software capabilities, because a lot of companies are focusing on the hardware only. And for those companies, the customers are actually quite dependent on their innovation and on their pricing. So we see for customers the advantage to use Redrop to decrease their price and increase flexibility. And for those producers, we actually want them to come to our platform, because we have the state-of-the-art AI software and because we have the customers. So it's kind of approach from both sides.
Very, very impressive product, very cool. Concerning reliability of energy and pricing, first of all, how do you stay competitive to fossil-based energy production? And secondly, how can you make sure if, for example, the sun doesn't shine or there's no wind, that you have the needed energy produced?
Okay, so to repeat your question, so first of all, you wanted to know how can we stay competitive to fossil fuels, and also how we make sure that if there's no energy, like no wind or no sun, we still get energy. So maybe to answer the second question first, we are still connected to the main grid in our areas because it's also a safety thing, and also like Lucas, for example, said, we will be able to feed actually renewable energy to the main grid. So if our batteries are empty and then there's no renewable energy, we will still be able to source energy from the main grid and to stay competitive with fossil fuels. So basically, if you have your own microgrid at home, you don't need to pay for fossil fuel generated electricity. So in the long term, it will be definitely cheaper because solar and also wind energy gets more cheaper than fossil fuels, especially also when you consider phasing out of coal. There will be less fossil fuels available, and also oil prices are increasing. So they will actually be more expensive and we are cheaper, so that makes us competitive.
How do you plan on integrating wind energy into microgrids? Because right now we already have a problem of integrating wind energy with the 10A rule. So how do you get the wind energy in the city or into microgrids? Because it's mainly a space problem now.
So that's when kind of where we individualize the projects to the customer's needs. You're totally right. Possibly if we're looking at a microgrid that's in the city, possibly a wind plant is not really feasible. But our product is also a great opportunity for remote communities to actually leverage renewable energies. And in those kind of projects, we definitely have the space needed for wind farms. Okay. With that, I think we don't have more time. And I would now ask you to take your clothes off, your hats off to the next idea, and put your hands up for the last team.
All right. So we want to talk about something that you do on a daily basis, or hopefully at least on a weekly basis, and that is showering. So take Noah, for example. Noah likes to ride his bike and afterwards take a long hot shower. In Bavaria, we would call him a Warmduscher. But Noah, actually I have bad news for you. Showering, or with each shower, you emit 2.2 kilograms of CO2. And that is actually quite unsustainable. And also, did you know that energy prices rose by about 9% from on a year-to-year basis? And the same is expected to be true for water prices due to increased water scarcity. So showering will become more and more expensive. Now, there are solutions out there that allow you to recycle the water that you used when showering, but they come with a hefty price tag of 5,000 euros. So they are more a solution for wealthy individuals. But this is where Redrop comes in.
Redrop is a repurification filter system that finally makes showering sustainable and, most of all, affordable for everyone, not just the upper class. So using the Redrop system, you can obviously save water, but you can also save energy, as we need less energy to actually heat the water that you use for showering. This results in less money you spend on monthly or yearly utility bills. There you go. And on top of that, you also pay absolutely no purchase or installment costs as we install the product in your home completely free of charge. So how exactly does it work? See this beautiful shower over here and think about Noah. This is his shower in his home flat at home. First things first, absolutely no need to rip your whole wall apart or to renovate your whole bathroom. We will just adapt our system onto the shower that you already have. How do we do that? We will replace the drain that you currently have in your shower and equip it with a drain that has smart sensors installed in it that can detect how dirty the water actually is. If we look at Noah, you met him earlier, I think most of you would agree with me that not every single drop of water that reaches the drain actually needs to go to the canalization right away, but we can repurify some of that. So the second thing that we replace is the shower faucet, which will be connected to both your water supply, so hot water and cold water, as you usually know it, and also to the drain that we installed. So the water, once it's like censored by our smart sensors, can it be repurified or not? If it can be, goes up to our filter system, which is consisting of 3 different parts. First, we will get rid of all of the major parts like hair or skin particles that you don't really want to have in your shower water coming out of your shower head. The second thing is then getting rid of all of the different bacteria. We will use UV radiation for that. And then the third step would be to make sure that the water actually has the temperature Noah wants it to have. As the whole process takes only a couple of seconds, the water is actually quite hot. So we only need to put in some minor hot water from your tap water, and then it can get right out of your shower head again. Using our app, Noah can then regularly check how much water and energy his home flat is actually saving. For a 3-person household, that would result in approximately 1,200 liters of water and 60 kilowatt hours of energy in 1 week. Despite some invoice things and giving feedback possibilities, he can also see when maintenance is due. So we will push a push notification to him. Thank you, Marvin. Once a filter, for example, needs to be exchanged. We will automatically send the filter to Noah's home, and he can just replace the filter by himself. And spare parts are actually completely free of charge. So what is Noah paying for then?
Well, let's get to the money talk. So at the moment, Noah is paying roughly €1.80 for taking a shower. These costs are for basically going to his energy and water provider. Now, with our technological solution, we are able to cut these costs down to 50 cents per shower. Now, out of these huge savings that we generate, our goal is to get a 60% share of those savings. Well, that looks like a huge chunk at the first sight, but we still enable our customers to actually save between 20 and 30% on their daily utility bill, and therefore making it still financially attractive for them. So together with his 2 flatmates, he's actually able to save roughly €400 on a yearly basis, while we are generating revenue of €600. So I think we've clarified that the first drinks tonight are on Noah, so we can zoom out a bit and look at how is our pricing working on a more general level. So we have 2 principles guiding our pricing model. The first one is that we have a dynamic pricing, really just looking at the energy and water costs that you are saving. Therefore, our solution is financially attractive to different people, independent of their shower behavior and also independent of the location they're living in, because we will take account the local prices. The second principle is that this is the only fee we're taking. So there are no additional maintenance, product, or installation costs, but just this single fee. This way, we can also make sure that low-income classes have the opportunity to benefit from our product. So how can we actually make this work?
We thought about that and structured our business model to support our long-lasting product. Yeah, just quick. And one thing that we strongly rely on are partnerships and networks. As such, we pay utmost importance to choosing the right installation partners, because they have a direct contact to our customers as they are going to maintain the shower and install it. And second, as we want to buy low cost but sustainable materials, we also rely on a strong network and partners for the procurement part. And then the second bucket that we strongly rely on are digital technologies. As such, we have a predictive maintenance platform that is helping us to make sure that we detect when certain parts of our shower system are going to be broken, so we can prevent that and actually replace it, or send, as we've heard it, send the parts before so that they are replaced. And by that, we reduce our costs to a minimum, because, as we have said, we're not going to charge the customer for the maintenance. And the fraud detection is there in place to make sure that Noah is not cheating on how much water he actually consumes.
So let's take a look at the 5 most important steps for Redrop in the upcoming years. First of all, we want to launch our product in Germany. Second, we want to grow by diversifying into the B2B market, offering our shower system not only to private customers, but also to companies like gyms or fitness studios. Third, we want to expand our current product by introducing a shower profile, which basically cuts off all the adjustments normally needed when you're trying to find basically the sweet spot between perfect temperature and perfect throughput, thus making showering even more sustainable. Third, we want to expand with our product all over Europe. And fifth and lastly, we want to establish a prediction platform beside from our normal shower system, mainly targeted at utility providers, where we were leveraging the data we have from customer showering behavior to offer a prediction of water consumption and therefore making them better prediction and also basically run the water infrastructure more smoothly. So increasing the time frame right now and looking to the very far, far future, and more precisely on the 4 scenarios we generated in 2042. The beauty of this is that our product really works in all the scenarios. Best in the top right corner, due to the global supply chains as well as standardized regulations, as well as customers really demanding sustainable products. Stepping back and coming back to today, this is the team behind Redrop, and together we want to revolutionize the way we shower today. And who wants to shower with us? If interested, scan the QR code, fill out the survey, and thanks for your attention.
Thanks for the idea. I think that's really an amazing thing. So thank you, really. But my question is, when you put it to market, how do you prevent others from copying it with another price model? Because I think if you build it yourself or just buy the hardware as an end user, you can get more profit from it, probably. Or I would say with a rough calculation in mind. So my question is there some technical USP you have which others can't reach? For example, yeah, I mean the app thing is definitely something, but like just from the savings side. Or are there protection mechanisms like a patent or something you looked into how to protect this idea?
Yeah, so I think I'll tackle the first question before I hand it over to Jana. Just repeating your question, the question was basically, isn't it more basically cost efficient for an end consumer to just buy such a product and therefore being able to generate all the savings? Yes, this is true, and there are already solutions out there doing that. The problem is that they are like really costly, and therefore we specifically wanted to go for such a pricing model where we basically have a subscription fee, because this allows also people that don't necessarily have the budget to actually buy the product to also benefit from such a product, which is also why we first want to tackle individuals, because that's usually where the budget is missing, and only in a second step we want to go further into the B2B market, like for example gyms, because usually they might have the budget to also just buy such products in the first place.
Yeah, and then maybe adding up on that, so most of the systems that are already out there actually require you to renovate your whole bathroom. So there's a completely new shower installed, and our shower might not look as beautiful or sexy as the solutions out there, but it's super easy to just adapt it to your current shower system. And that also makes it valuable, for example, for Noah living in a shared flat in Munich, right? Otherwise, you would only consider it if you like build a house that you like plan on living in for the next 10 years or something.
I have no question. I just want to show with you. My question is, so as I understood, you want to use AI for like predictive maintenance and fraud detection, but is there also like some usage of AI directly associated to the product?
Yeah, so just going to quickly repeat the question. It was regarding basically using AI directly in the product itself. So, I mean, we have sensors and we have to make sense of the data. So this is like directly on the product an application field. that's something we have to do up front, right? Like it can't be learning directly. It can be, but at first we really think that it makes sense to have that basically developed up front, and then it's there, because I mean, otherwise we would also have to handle all this data coming from the houses back to our basically backbone, and then learning there and coming back. So we first say learn in the first place, implement it there, and then let's see what we can do in the future, but that's definitely a great idea.
You ensure charging the 60%, I'm not sure, but 60 from the customer. Do you count the amount of water he used, and then you just take the price of the water the customer is paying, and how does it work?
Yeah, so basically works that we count the water. Let's repeat the question. The question was basically, how do we make sure that we know like where we're applying those 60%, like what's the base rate that the customer is saving, where we need to apply that. And that's basically exactly the way you describe it. We're measuring, first of all, how much water is actually being used, and then at the same time also like what's the temperature of it, and based on the temperature we can calculate the energy savings, and then we apply the local rates. All right?
Yes. I think we're out. But feel free to hit us up after the session. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this was the end of our 7 weeks trend seminar. As said before, this is only summary of all gained insights. By the end of September, we will open source and share with you the whole trends report. But for now, we encourage everyone to have a look in trend reports from previous years and make yourself familiar with insightful information out of there.
And on an ending note, now we really would like to thank our project partner, the Bavarian AI Council and the Bavarian State Ministry for Digital Affairs. Thank you so much for your support here at CDTM. Thank you for your support for this trend seminar. And we really hope that these findings will be helpful for your future endeavors in tackling climate change in the AI era. And now I would like to hand over to Professor Sami Hadadin, who's heading the Bavarian AI Council. He joins us virtually, and he sent a video that we will watch now.
Hi everybody, this is Sami Hadadin speaking. Today is the day that the CDTM Trend Seminar has come to an end for this year, and you as a team have been working on tackling climate change in the era of AI. We all know that artificial intelligence has been revolutionizing our everyday lives, has kind of come to various forms to us. We use it in all kinds of applications, ranging from household to healthcare, even in exploring space, we use artificial intelligence technology. And at the same time, it seems more than urgent and pressing that for one of our greatest challenges, the climate change, we should use this emerging and ever-empowering technology to really fight against these great challenges of mankind. And today, we're going to see the results of the Trend Seminar, where some of the most brilliant students from TUM and LMU together have been asked to do the Trend Seminar of CDTM, a particularly fascinating framework in which you guys were trying to analyze how can we use AI technology to battle the climate change, how can we use it to monitor it better, how can we use it to better understand what's going on the planet. And this is obviously something that touches all of our lives, not only our generation, but also the next ones to come. And I really think, as the chairman of the Bavarian AI Council, that you have really a tremendous responsibility here, because this Trend Seminar output will not only be used in the framework of the seminar, but we will also let it be input for the council, for the Bavarian AI Council, and try to give inputs to the recommendations of future Bavarian strategy. On a personal note, I just had yesterday my most recent, quite devastating experience with what we as mankind do to our planet. I'm here at the Red Sea, where as a child I have spent so much time to experience the underwater world that is absolutely astonishing here, that inspired me to become a scientist, that inspired me to really want to understand nature, to use also technology to create a better world and do my own contribution in this sense. And yesterday I really was looking forward to showing these experiences to my kids who are now about the same age when I was coming here for the first time. And frankly, it was quite devastating, seeing how just within 30 years, the world changed around here from all the colors that were shining through the water to the surface, and you could just see them from a small boat that I was driving around back then, to today's visual experience that very rarely has really these beautiful corals that, you know, we all know from the great pictures of National Geographic and Discovery channels and so on and so forth. So I was really looking forward to showing this and sharing this with my kids, and also inspiring them to see nature as something incredibly beautiful to not only understand and try to see, but also to support and to protect it. Yeah, and as I said, quite devastating. And again, just one of many observations over the last years that I guess we all make to really try to show that it's not only about time, but we really need to be much, much more engaged in these things. I also personally think that Bavaria, as one of the high-tech hubs in Europe, needs to take significantly more responsibility to create technologies that can be exported, that can really create an impact at places that we don't directly see. And AI, among many other technologies, of course, can play a difference, or can make a difference here. And you, as the next generation, can make an even bigger difference, because you will be the innovators and the creators of new technology and sustainable models that might drive not only the economies of the future, but really the society of the future that hopefully lives in a much more sustainable way with our beautiful, however, more and more threatened environment. Really looking forward to the outputs of what you have been creating over the last weeks and months. It was a great pleasure to work with you. Wish you all the best. And now I'm going to try to see whether I can show my kids other places that have inspired me when I was a kid. All the best, see you soon, and wish you a wonderful day.
Thank you, Professor Haderdien, for your words for us. And now we would like to hand over to Mrs. Klöpping from the Bavarian State Institute of Digital Affairs for some closing words in person. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. I have the honor to give you some closing remarks, and I promise you I will keep it short. But it's a little bit difficult after your impressive presentations today. First, some of you might remember me from the introductory event 7 weeks ago, but I know that you have seen a lot of people and a lot of new information in the meantime. So my name is Susanne Klöpping, and I'm working at the Bavarian State Ministry for Digital Affairs. I'm head of the division for digitalization and sustainability and smart cities, smart regions. And I would like to give you first and foremost a warm thank by Judith Gerlach, the Bavarian State Minister for Digital Affairs, for your work during the last weeks. And I also want to thank you for your creativity, for your ideas, for your investment of time and work over the last weeks. I'm wondering how much sleep you have had per night on average time, but perhaps after this presentations, we can talk about that a little bit informally. Yes, I'm also aware that the amount of work for the organizers of this seminar has not been much less than yours, so I would like to thank you, Carla Pregel and Anne-Sophie Liebenderlück, which is a very long name, and Dennis Lazarenko for your great work here. And of course, I don't want to forget to thank again the AI Council. We have two members of the AI Council here, Professor Hilgendorf and Professor Wittenberg. And Professor Haarhoff, you have met him some weeks ago. He cannot be here tonight. He told me that he's very sad about that, and I think you can also imagine that because you have seen with how much compassion he has supported the seminar and the topic, and he also wants to thank you for your work here. And I was very much impressed. I want to tell you, 2 weeks ago, I have been with you with your presentation here virtually. I haven't been here in the room, but I have seen your presentation of the business ideas. It was a much wider range of business ideas than we have seen today. So I have seen how deeply you have dived into the topic and how much ideas and creativity and thinking about the possibilities to use artificial intelligence for climate protection you have invested and you have developed during this time. So this was impressive for me, and I think you have seen by yourself how much potential there is by artificial intelligence to use it for climate protection, also with in combination with other digital technologies. This is a very strong instrument, like artificial intelligence combined with digital twins, as you have also developed a business model for that, or with quantum computing, which is a little bit more in the future, but you know, we have to think about the future. And what I really hope is that you will stay with the insights you have won here in the seminar during your further studies and during your further career. And what would be the most wonderful outcome of the seminar for me would be if you stay here in Bavaria, founding lots of startups like this you've presented us here, developing lots of ideas like these you have presented here, and working in enterprises fostering the possibilities of artificial intelligence and digital technologies for climate protection and for protection of our environment. As you know, Bavaria is, of course, the most interesting place for doing this, because we have the most supportive researchers, the most supportive industry partners here, and a great innovation ecosystem. So think about that, and I really hope that we will meet again in different contexts here in Bavaria. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to have the trend report in my hands, to read it closely and to think about what to do with your conclusions and with your solutions you have developed. And now I wish you a happy Easter and a very nice evening here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this kind closing words. It has been a pleasure to work together with you and to really have the possibility of influencing or shaping or giving our point of view into this whole topic. And we're actually really, really excited also to see how Bavaria takes on these findings that we did during the past 7 weeks and really integrates them into their future strategies. With that, we're coming to an end, but before closing up, if you're watching this and you're a student in studying at TUM or LMU, please inform yourselves about the CDTM, talk to these great students that you have here, and consider applying for our study program. The deadline will be on the 31st of May. And if you're a company, feel free to reach out to us via info@cdtm.de. We're always looking for new project partners and happy to look how we could cooperate together. And with that, I want to say a big, big thank you to our streaming team, who has done an incredible job on including our virtual audience with us. So big round of applause for that. I also want to make a shout out to our helpers here and also outside, who are students from previous classes who are supporting with the cameras, with the drinks outside. So also thank you so much for taking your afternoon to be here and to support the new class. And of course, a last very, very big, big thank you to the class of Spring 22, who have in the past 7 weeks dived in so deeply into this topic, which is incredible how much you can find out of a topic in just such a short amount of time. So going from really deep into the trends, creating really interesting scenarios, and also developing future-proof business models. So very, very big round of applause for you guys for this great presentation. With that, we're also saying goodbye. Thank you very much, virtual audience, for also joining us through the live stream. And to everyone here, feel free to engage outside, ask those questions that you couldn't ask before. And yeah, have a great evening and Easter holiday. Thank you.
Thank you.